Hey guys, if you're looking for help with your Amazon business in terms of troubleshooting or strategy, visit sellersessions.com/consultancy or drop me a message to danny@sellersessions.com. Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. Today I bring back Chris McCabe. Hey Chris, how you doing?
Hey, happy to be here, as always.
Cool. It's been a shitstorm out there at the moment, isn't it?
It's been a very active, crazy month, yes.
Right, so last episode we discussed was final wording with regards to Amazon accounts. Do you want to explain quickly what that is before we go into?
Final wording is when they tell you they're not responsible for replying anymore. Essentially, they're trying to jump off the "we need to reply to you" wagon. They're saying they've given you enough of a shot already and they don't need to respond to you.
Yeah.
Any further appeals. They've already given you 2, maybe 3, and that's where they consider your third strike.
And obviously that comes down to not having the right kind of plan and constant pestering going through all the Amazon queues.
Yeah. Your plan doesn't show that you delved into Seller Central or any other part of your operations. Probably you didn't identify the root causes properly. You just parroted back to them what they told you your buyer or brand complaints were from. And your solutions, your methods of improvement are not sufficient to address those root causes. And you've sent in a couple of plans that may have been somewhat close or somewhat far off, but either way, you weren't 100% there. Mm-hmm. And at some point, they have to draw the line with the email queues as stuffed with contacts as they are and say they're not going to talk to you anymore.
Yeah. And so next one here is, thank you for submitting your plan. Unfortunately, your plan is not sufficient because it resembles a plan you submitted for prior appeal.
Yeah.
So it says your new plan must address why the previous plan was ineffective in preventing complaints and how you provide additional complaints in the future. To be sufficient, your plan must identify the reason why the previous plan was ineffective. So obviously people are doing the same thing over and over again and they think they can knock out a template. Do you want to go into that one?
Yeah, I mean, and that goes for not just account reinstatements, but ASIN reinstatements. And sellers have gotten in the habit of every time I lose an ASIN, I'm going to submit the same thing that worked last time because it worked and it was successful. Yeah. I don't know if in some cases people are slightly modifying these things, but at first glance, it still looks the same. I mean, maybe some sellers are thinking, no, I made minor changes to that. You can't say it's identical. Well, the investigator thought it was identical, and they're the one who counts.
Well, let's just quickly pick that apart. Being somebody who worked inside, what does the case story look like for an investigator in this kind of situation?
I mean, but let me just give some perspective on, and maybe I can ask you this question because you've done a lot more selling than I have.
Yes.
At what point do sellers who are sending these templates, which essentially they are templates, whether they're slightly modified or not, at what point do you think about and understand that the investigator reading your template has read the same exact template, whether you bought it from a third party or slightly modified it from a forum post or a Facebook group?
Yeah.
17 other sellers have sent that same template and they've read it like 4 times that hour. So at what point do you realize that that's going to hurt your cause?
Yeah. Well, it is, obviously.
Investigators are going through these thousands a week, sure, but they're going to remember if they see the same one like 25 times in the last 2 days, right?
Yeah.
So I guess I'm answering your question with a question, but
yeah, so I wanted to, obviously that you've answered part of the question, but let's look at the case history. So let's just imagine that you were the first one through the door with the second draft. Maybe is it because they read your previous one? Is there a paper trail? Obviously there is a paper trail.
Yeah.
But does people dip into it? Do they go back far into it?
Oh, yeah.
Or do they just skim?
Right. To answer the other part, there are account annotations. There's plenty of places they can look in your account annotations to look at a previous appeal if they take the time to do so. If you're banking on reinstatement simply because you don't think they'll have time, I mean, that's hit or miss. You're sort of rolling the dice with that. Yep. The bottom line is they have the option to go back and see what your previous appeals look like. It'll take them 2 seconds to pull up a previous appeal and compare it to your current one and see how similar they are. And then it'll only take 2 more seconds to make the decision, yes, these are similar, which means you've just sent them a template and it's getting auto-rejected essentially because they know it's the same. They're happy and they're grateful to you because you made their job 10 times easier. They don't even need to read the appeal that you just sent. and they can just rubber stamp the rejection and send it back.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm hearing from people a lot more who have told me that they bought a template somewhere for a few $100, and it didn't get them anywhere. It's like, well, you shouldn't expect that to get you anywhere. Hopefully you did it just because you only wanted to spend a few $100 in an appeal, and you hope that there was a 1 in 10 chance, not a 1 in 2 chance that it would work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, so moving on.
Yep.
If you do not send an acceptable plan of actions within 17 days or after 2 unsuccessful appeals, whichever occurs sooner, we may not allow you to sell on Amazon. Now, that's a big one.
That's a new one.
Yeah.
I saw that first, 3-4 weeks ago. It started with transparency suspensions. People who were not playing by the transparency rules were getting that. And then I thought it was interesting that it only took a week or 10 days for me to see it attached to inauthentic item suspensions, because that's one of the most common ones that exists.
Yeah.
So I'm just expecting another week to go by, and we'll see it for used sold as new, for safety concerns, and for rights owner infringements as well, because especially the rights owner infringement suspensions, which are very plentiful these days, as I'm sure you've heard. It takes investigators a long time to sort through how many retractions you've got, which ones you don't have, complaint IDs, ASINs. Those are a mess. So I would expect them to shift it over to that right away, because they don't want to give you an endless amount of attempts. They need to control the queues somehow. I mean, things are pretty chaotic this time of year anyway, and they're chaotic beyond that because they're drowning in these appeals. Why are they drowning in appeals? Well, they've been suspending people like crazy, especially for infringements. But the bottom line is, get your first POA set and well written. Don't expect that you're going to have 3, 4, 5 shots at this, excluding escalations. I mean, you might get 2 shots, then they say, well, we're closing your account, and they start your 90-day cycle. And then, of course, whether you're final worded or they give you 2 shots and close you down, you can still do an escalation. But do you want to hang your hopes on an escalation, or do you want to get it right the first or the second time?
Yeah.
So.
But no, that is it's pretty damning though to have it down to 2 unsuccessful appeals, because I think most people will get suspended for the first time, whether that's ASIN related or account wide. They will make the most common mistakes that anyone does, which is emotion, too much wording, presenting themselves that it's life's unfair, etc., and there's no structure to their appeals. So they've literally got, if they do try it themselves, the chances are they're going to get it wrong the first time, aren't they? Unless they've got some experience.
Odds are that the first one won't sail through. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
So then your second one would have to recover from the first one that didn't have much of a chance to begin with, and your second one will have to be 10 times stronger. Yeah. And if you're not accepted and reinstated on the second one, then you better make sure you're pretty close to the mark, so that if you submit another one and you say, this is revised, we took care of the last missing gap in this appeal, they'll look and they'll agree, and they'll be like, yeah, you're right. Your second one was pretty close, and this one finishes it off. We'll reinstate you. Otherwise, they're going to consider that your third strike, and they're not. I mean, I'm not really talking to as many sellers these days who contact me who say, I've done this 5 times, I've done this 6 times, I'm not getting anywhere. I mean, to me, that's suicidal selling. You're not trying to get your account back. You're rationalizing and making excuses why you don't need help, but you do need help. You don't have to get my kind of help, but you better get some real kind of help soon, because they're not going to entertain the 6th, 7th, 8th attempt. They're going to final word earlier. At this time of year, Q4, they don't want to keep listening to these same stories. They want to cut the conversation.
Yeah. Patents, you said you've been getting hit with these on the hour pretty much recently. I won't read out the message here because that'll be private to the seller, but do you want to give us a quick top down on what's been going on and how this is all starting to play out at the moment?
Yeah, it's the latest, greatest anti-competitive behavior in the attack method. Same as hijacked listings or leaving fake reviews for competitors. Infringements have been used before, but I've been waiting for the patents avenue to open up and go wide for a year. That's finally happening, it looks like, based on my inbox. And a lot of private label brands and sellers have been coming to me saying, and my first question to them is, did you have an attorney look at this? Do they know patents? Do they understand what's going on? Most of them say no. Most of them are giving their amateur legal opinion on whether or not there's any validity to it. Mm-hmm. So the first step is to make a determination if there's any validity to the design or patent complaint or not. And if there isn't, then of course you're disputing it, notice dispute. And you'd have to have a well-rounded, well-reasoned dispute to say why there's no credibility or validity to that complaint. But if you're not sure, you better figure out what your strategy plan is, because if there is validity to it and you send a notice dispute, Amazon will keep sending you back to the rights owner, and then you're maybe hearing from them, maybe not, but you're just kind of aimlessly searching about for a solution. I've had a few people just say they want to, we don't want to get lawyers involved. We don't want to think about it. We just want to hire you and take care of it. It's a little bit more complex than that. I can't give you a, season.
Well, just picking out bits from his message here, which I won't read out.
Yep.
He's been reinstated 6 times by Amazon.
Yeah.
For this problem.
And it keeps coming back.
Yeah.
They basically want to be whitelisted. We fixed this 6 times. Why do I fix it a 7th time? Why do I have to keep sending emails to notice every day? Because I'm under attack over and over, and they just keep resubmitting, and they're not being banned. Now, I've worked with a couple of people, a seller in the UK the other day, who have successfully gotten that party. If it's the same party every time, it helps, of course. But they have successfully gotten that party banned from submitting notices. That's what you want to do next.
Yeah,
that's what your target is. I'm still hashing out with him exactly what he did. It was kind of an interesting case where we worked on it together all day. And I gave him advice throughout the day, and by the end of the day, he had it done, which was great for timeline and conversion. But essentially, he was like, "Look, I've sent this over and over. It's from the same party." The trick becomes, are you getting it from a different email address, different seller every time?
Yeah.
But you can't just sit there and get attacked by somebody. You have to report them to abuse teams and try to get them suspended if they're just going to abuse policy left and right, when there's nothing to it but a notice dispute that you keep swatting away.
It's nuts. I think it's absolutely nuts, obviously, because if you're selling in super competitive niches, but just to show the moral compass to some people. What money does to people is interesting.
They're not thinking about the morality of it. They're thinking of, you've got a product selling that's competing with mine, and I want that.
Yeah.
And I found a way within Amazon to get it. And I can, I'm jumping on the shoulders of a team that's willing to do this enforcement action on you. And you have to spend time. First of all, you're losing sales. Second of all, you're not even sure when you're going to get it resolved. And thirdly, you have to spend all the time fixing it every time I do it to you.
Yeah.
So that's a huge loophole. And now that people know it works, they're doing it like crazy. Otherwise, I wouldn't hear about this 10 times a day.
But going back to your point though, we were talking about like Amazon updated their reviews recently, and you can't do this to competitors because they can get suspended. So can you see there's an update in the terms of service coming soon to deal with trolling like this, of people trolling, their competitors? Because as you said, they're always finding there's a new trend, isn't there? There's a new loophole. Like you move it, okay, we're not going to abuse them and get loads of cheap reviews off a Fiverr.
Right.
What we're going to do is hit them with fake patent complaints.
Yep. Or
change their listings and change their brand name and strand their inventory, move it to another category where there isn't
inventory stranding back is kind of an interesting problem that would do a separate show on. But it'd be interesting to see if somebody can identify a competitor doing this through the platform and find a way to take, legal action, sue them for damages or for losses.
Yeah.
And get that into court and forget about TOS for a while and say this person used the Amazon platform to attack my business and interfere with my business.
Yeah.
It's going to be tougher if it's a Chinese competitor. If it's not, it might be, doable. And so I'm looking to see. I think we're getting to the point, I guess, to answer your question, that sellers are going to have to be much more willing to take legal action, either against each other or to drag Amazon into it and say, look, I've given you everything. You've taken the minimum standard of action that you can take to protect your own liability, but my business is still being damaged and upset by these activities, and the actions you're taking aren't really permanent in any way. They only last for 18 hours or so.
Yeah.
So it's not making any fundamental difference on the huge losses my business is taking. And see if Amazon legal gets more involved in the process of, you know.
We know there's one way to resolve it. Just get the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, all these people to report on it like in depth and consistently. And that's where Amazon tends to look up, I suppose. But then saying that, we're only sellers, we're vendors, we're not customers. If it was reviews, they take action.
Yeah,
maybe sellers, it's like the trash takes out the trash. Maybe
yeah,
I don't know.
it's hard to it's hard to say whether. I mean, first of all, people have written articles on similar things, maybe not this in particular, but
Yeah.
And they trend for a day or two, and then the news cycle turns over. So you can't really count on things like that. And also, there's been a lot of misunderstanding about what the lasting effect on Amazon internal actions or SOPs or policies some of these articles will have. Some of them do, some of them don't. I mean, I've seen a lot of this stuff myself. I mean, how much of it can I even predict, let alone anyone else?
Yeah.
So there have been stories I've heard about which I thought, if the New York Times catches wind of this, they're going to run with it. They're going to do a story. This is a natural fit for anyone who reads about business or tech or Amazon. And they never cover it. They don't take any interest in it, I guess. I mean, I'm not sure. I don't really, interact with them, but you're surprised at how little interest there is out there, and they're more interested in writing about Facebook and the influence on U.S. elections coming up in 2 weeks. So, yeah.
Makes sense. Is there anything you want to add before we leave?
No, I just it's Q4, so just understand the only other point about the 2 strikes or 2 appeals. A lot of people are asking me, well, how quickly can we get back on? I mean, it's going. Not only do you only get 2 chances according to that message if they send that to you, but it's going to take longer for them to respond anyway. Yeah. And a lot of people don't even get responses at all because seller performance queues are so crazy right now that you have to send things twice half the time. So between those 3 things, I mean, just expect to burn yourself for the long haul if you have an account suspension or your top ASIN goes down. So I understand why people want to appeal quickly because they know it'll take longer to get a response. But at the same time, if you appeal quickly, you send in a response that's low quality, then expect it to take twice as long, half again as long? I don't know.
Yeah.
You're building in extra time that they've already padded for their response time in Q4. So think about that.
So moral of the story, guys, just be super vigilant, stay on top of things, make sure your appeal's good, pull in the right people. Just bolt everything down and protect yourself as best as possible.
Garbage in, garbage out, in other words.
So how can people reach you, mate?
Yeah, so I mean, my website, ecommercechris.com, and then of course Chris at ecommercechris is my email, and that's the best place to reach me now. We're working 7 days a week, Q4, so cool. I won't be hard to find.
All right, no worries, guys. Thanks for joining us, Chris. Thanks for joining us. If this is your first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you again in a few days' time. Take care.